USA Warrior Stories is a not-for-profit organization designed to record, archive, and share videos of veterans' stories, to help veterans make a connection with one another and to help us all better understand their sacrifices for our freedoms.
At Myrtle Beach Air Force Base, General O.P. Weiland highlights ceremonies reactivating one of history's outstanding fighter units. He presents the colors of the 354th Fighter Day Wing to Colonel Francis Gabreski, the wing's new commander and top living U.S. ace. In assuming command, Colonel Gabreski brings to the 354th a World War II record of 31 Nazi planes downed in aerial combat, and credit for 2 1/2 destroyed on the ground. He flew P-47s and before that, Spitfires.
Dad decided that he would take the family out as an outing to drive out to Cleveland for the day. And at this time we were attending the National Air Show. When they were moving at 200 and some 300 miles an hour, that was just out of this world at that time. Jimmy Doolittle was flying at a GB at that time, and he won the race. I was getting ready for my future, didn't know exactly what I wanted to do, but I thought about going to college and doing the same thing that my older brother did. And he took pre-med, went to Notre Dame, and went through medical school. So I started Notre Dame, and while there, I saw the airlines going across the dome just about every day, the commercial airliners. I was thinking back then, gee, it would be a very, very exciting time to be in the field of aviation. 1939 was a very, very memorable year for me because I'm of Polish descent, and that's when Germany attacked Poland, September of 1939. I received my first wire from the War Department stating that I would report to Parks Air College for my primary training. I was accepted. I was one of the very early classes that were expanding in a big program for the war.
This is the beginning of a routine flight of Army training planes. These cadets are learning fast and will soon be full-fledged flying members of the Army Air Corps.
And I was lucky enough to graduate March 15th of 1941. They asked me what I wanted, and of course I wanted fighters. And they asked me where I wanted to go, and I said I wanted to go to Hawaii. Well, December 7th was a Sunday. It was just like any other Sunday. I got up early in the morning to make Mass, to make 8 o'clock Mass at Schofield. And I was up at 6 o'clock, but by the time I get through taking a shower and doing other things, well, I heard the bombing, or at least the explosions, off at a distance. And it was coming a little closer. And there were machine guns. The machine guns were rat-a-tat-tat, going off from what appeared to be an airplane. And the airplane, as I looked out the window, airplane was a Japanese airplane that had his guns going full blast, strafing the barracks. There were 50 of us living in that barracks, so they all got themselves pulled together, realizing that it was a very serious warning and a very serious thought. We're at war. But as we went out the barracks, the flight line was black. It was burning. All the airplanes were burning. The hangars, some of them were burning. Black smoke. Well, the first thing that we realized that had to be done, we had to move the airplanes that were intact from those airplanes that were burning on the line. It was every officer as well as all the airmen that were in the area. They all put in their two hands and so forth, and we saved about 50% of the airplanes. The squadron leader, Aaron Tyre, decided, well, let's go over Pearl Harbor. But the most striking point was when we looked down and saw the battleships listing. What a way to start to view the first day of the war. Of course, reading an awful lot and hearing an awful lot about the Polish Air Force and the RAF Air Force in Europe, I thought that it would, since I do speak Polish, and I thought it would be a good idea to get some advanced training in the European theater of operations if it was possible for me to change theaters. So I flew across as an individual. It was a China Clipper from Honolulu, and it was a Yankee Clipper from New York to Lisbon. And from Lisbon, the RAF picked me up and flew me into England. And that was my first introduction to war. And of course, what a dramatic change. One of the individuals, Tadek Anders and Tadek Safis, who was a squadron commander, took me under their wing, and they looked at me as a Polish Yankee. We can't let anything happen to you. We're going to take care of you like better than we take care of our own. I would say that if I didn't have that exposure, if I didn't have the training that I did receive, I probably wouldn't be around very long. After I have completed 20 operational missions with the Polish Air Force, the 56th Fighter Group came into Europe, and they were stationed at Gothiel for operational training and introduction into the European theater. In the early days, you escorted about 200, 300 airplanes at one time. Our job had to be done in relationship to what the Luftwaffe was doing. At first, the Luftwaffe was attacking the bombers from the side and from the rear. It came to a point where the Luftwaffe decided that their best means of attacking the bombers was, again, head-on. So they were coming in groves. You had 200 airplanes. Luftwaffe would come together in a flight. Once they got that gaggle together, then they would all come in with a little separation between airplanes, and it all try to hit them at the same time. We took our 56th Fighter Group ahead of the bombers for, I would say, it's a 15 or 20 miles, and it would intercept the Luftwaffe formation coming in. We flew directly through them with their guns blazing. Well, my first kill was with the 56th Fighter Group flying a P-47. We were flying rodeo, in other words, fighter sweeps over France. And this happened to be a very clear day. You could see for 50 miles around you. And we did see a few of the Luftwaffe aircraft at a lower level. And it was a perfect setup for an amateur to get involved in with a bunch of pros, because we had the advantage in altitude, which we could convert into speed, which we did. And I had the airplane called in to me, and I could pick up the airplane. And at that time, I headed down, converted my speed, my altitude into speed, and I guess I must have been moving about 400 miles an hour by the time I got to my target. But I'm sure he didn't see me, and my rate of closure was so rapid that I didn't stay behind him very long. It was just a flash shot. And of course, luckily, I came within range and beyond. I practically flew through him, but I did hit him enough where he rolled over and hit the ground. So that was my first kill. But what really went through my mind afterwards, when I saw the airplane hit the ground and so forth, I got to thinking that, hey, it could have very easily happened to me if I were caught in a situation where I was trying to fire on the Luftwaffe airplane and some other Luftwaffe airplanes come in on me. So it gave me a sobering thought. It really did. When I went down, I wasn't shot down, and I actually was responsible for my own demise. In other words, it was target fixation. I stayed on a target too long. It was a ground target. When I came down, it was just a little bit too low, and the propeller hit the ground. So I bounced off, but once you bounce off the ground, your propeller is bent, then you have tremendous vibration. So I elected to belly land the airplane in enemy territory. So I found a little wheat field surrounded by trees. Everything turned out fairly well because I felt this airplane going up, and all of a sudden the noise subsided and I came back on my tail again. So I was in Germany. As I was running to the woods, I heard this sort of a ping and a whistle. And the first time it didn't bother me because I was concentrating on getting to the woods. But on the second and third time, I says, well, what's going on? And I turned around, and there were two infantrymen that were going down on their knees and firing their pistol. I mean, not their pistol, but their rifles at me. And what I heard were the bullets. The whistle was past my ears. And as they'd come down, they'd stop and come down on their knees to fire. I fell to the ground. And it was just a matter of leapfrogging. In other words, as they'd come down on their knees, I fall to the ground, and as they would start running towards me, I'd get up and start running. Saw a little path, and a little shelter. There was enough room underneath that little floor to get under. So I elected to get under that floor. They went right on by me, where I could practically touch their boots. They went right on by me and kept running. And I stayed hidden for about 5 or 6 hours till it started getting dark. After that, I decided that I better get out of this area as fast as I can. And I get up and start walking. And the first mistake I made, I should have been walking through woods, but I took this dirt road where the wagons and so forth, and it led into a village. I was forced to move through that little group. They looked at me suspiciously. They start walking towards me. When they start walking towards me, I started running for all I was worth. There were corn on both sides, and I parted the left-hand side as graceful as I could, and I went out as far as I could until I could hear their voices coming a little closer. Then I decided to just lay down, and I just laid there. All I can say is that I had this one that practically stepped on me, but he didn't see me. And I just laid there, and by that time it started sprinkling just a little bit, and it was getting dark. And I heard the people yelling at each other, to each other in German, and I laid there up until they decided that they'd give up the search and go back home. I didn't stay to the roads after that. I did no traveling on the roads whatsoever. I walked through the field and found myself just at a point where I thought I'd take a rest. And as I took a rest in a secluded sort of an area in the bushes and a few trees, so I saw a wagon coming up the field, And as the wagon came closer, I could hear a very common language. It was Polish. It was Polish. He was talking to his little boy, and his little boy was answering in Polish. And then, with a closer look, I noticed that he had a P on his lapel. He had an old coat and a P, which is you know, forced labor. I was pretty hungry by that time, so I braved to get up and say a few Polish words to him, which I did, and I told him who I was, and he looked startled, and he says, yes, I know, I saw your airplane yesterday going down. He said that he would come back. He said he'd bring me a little bit of water and some bread and quicksbrod and so forth. But it's going to be a little while because he has a few things he has to do. So I says, okay, I'll just sit right here. And after about 2 hours, he came. I thanked him again for coming back with the food and so forth, and water. And there was one thing that really struck me then, that, hey, he is risking his life by doing something like that. If he were seen by somebody like the Germans, I mean, his life would come to an end. So we sat around. I didn't ask him his name. He didn't ask my name, and there was nothing but the state of the war, and that's all we talked about. The fifth day, I got up as usual, the first light. Just as soon as I could make out my hand in front of me, I'd start walking. This one farmer was coming up his path. It wasn't a road, it was just a regular path with his 2 cows and his son. And he says, come with him. And he took me to his home. What he did is he telephoned whoever it was it was a community jail, and the constabulary turned me over to the Luftwaffe, two soldiers, and they in turn elected to take me to a rail line, which was wasn't that close. It was about 2 miles down the road. And at the rail line, it wasn't a station, but it was just one shed, where if there was somebody in that shed, the train would stop. And I went there with them in that shed, and it was a civilian train with civilians on it. Everybody, the German, it was a regular passenger train. As we got into Frankfurt, and the devastation there, I mean, the entire city was completely wiped out. The station was completely wiped out. The soldiers took me into Oberursel, and that was the interrogation center for fighters, American fighters, as well as bomber crews. Our situation in the camp was reasonably good, really, compared to the overall situation in Germany at that time. And we knew that someplace along the line at the end of the war, somebody's going to come in and pick us up, and we're going to go back home. But when the Russians came in, we of course went out to the main gate and hailed them as friends and so forth. The 8th Air Force was permitted to send in airplanes to Barth. There was a strip there, and they could send airplanes in, but they could not shut the engines down. As they would come in and get to the end of the runway, the prisoners were put aboard the airplane would come to the head of the runway again and take off. And within 2 days, we had 10,000 men out of the camp, and we all went down to France, which is what we call a central point that we call Lucky Strike.
With the 4th Fighter Interceptor Wing and later as commander of the famed 51st Fighter Interceptor Wing in Korea, Colonel Gabreski became the Air Force's 8th jet ace. He earned credit for downing 6 1/2 communist MiG-15s in his sorties up and down the air corridor between the 38th parallel and the Yalu River.